right, so you're thinking about going on an offshore fishing charter in 2024 here in the North Carolina area. That's where we are on this rainy day in Pirates Cove, North Carolina. And so in this video, we're going to talk about what could you expect to spend, because the reality is, Professor, sometimes people call you and they are confused about how much it really costs. What is an offshore versus what's a nearshore? And it can be confusing when you look on some of those booking sites as well.
Very much.
Can be confusing. So let's talk about that. Let's first define what going offshore actually means, because they need to clarify this when they're researching and when they're talking to a company.
In my personal opinion, going offshore means going to the continental shelf, the Gulf Stream.
Yes, which means how far off of North Carolina?
And it varies, but most of the time it's 30, 35, 40 miles.
Right, so if you're going out of the Nags Head area, Nags Head, Oregon Inlet, you're at least 30-ish miles if you go straight, but usually you're not going straight, you're going at angles. If you're going out of Hatteras, it's how many miles?
About the same.
About the same.
Yeah.
So that's why if you see offshore for $500 or $600 or $700, that's probably not offshore. That's probably what?
It's probably a nearshore and inshore trip.
Right.
Yeah.
Unless the person is a nonprofit organization and they're trying to lose money.
Right.
All right. Because in order to go that far, that means you're going to go at least back and forth. You're going to go 75, 80 miles throughout the day, once you figure in trolling time and whatnot.
Yeah.
So the point is, most of these sport fishers spend about $1,000 a day in fuel, right? Just to set the context of it, right? Yeah. So if someone truly is going offshore, and that's where you're going to find your yellowfin tuna, your big game, your mahi, your billfish, etc. If they're going offshore here in North Carolina, what's the range that you see out there? What would you expect them to find in 2024?
It's probably like $2,400 all the way up to like $3,500, depending on the boat.
That could be a bigger boat, can hold more people. Most of the boats hold
six.
Maximum, yeah. Most are licensed for that, because oftentimes people say, "Can I bring 8?" But you're saying most are in that. They're
correct.
Allowed legally.
Six paying passengers.
Right. Yeah. Now down in Hatteras, the average, sometimes you see a little bit lower cost because the run tends to be a little bit shorter. Is that accurate?
Yeah, and they have a little bit better fishing near shore too. Like they can catch mahis, pretty close to the beach a lot of times. It's just that the Gulf Stream curves in a lot closer.
Yeah. And so realistically though, if you're going offshore from North Carolina in 2024, you can expect to spend at least $2,000. That's the low end, but most of the time you're $2,400 to $3,500, to your point, in that range. And then you've got to consider the cost for the tip too. How does that generally work?
Yeah, so you'll have a mate on the boat that's going to be rigging all the baits and working the whole fishing operation, for you, working closely with you, guiding you how to bring the fish in. And he works hard all day long, and they work strictly off of tips. So normally you would tip the mate 18 to 20% of what the trip costs.
And for somebody that says, man, 18 to 20%, that's a lot to tip somebody for one day. The total amount of hours that the mate is actually working that day, even if it's a 12-hour fishing day, they're probably more in that 15-hour range. Is that accurate?
That's correct. And that's just when they're fishing. I mean, there's a lot of mate's work that goes on your lay days and all that stuff. The tackle has to be maintained. It's just baits have to be built, prepped. It's a lot of other work that's involved.
If you're thinking to yourself, that's really expensive, and I agree, it's not cheap, but there is a reason why the cost is that high. The cost to maintain the boat is phenomenally high. The cost for the fuel and the bait is very high. And so you got to pay the captain. We've already talked about the mate. Any other thing that they should be thinking about if they're researching pricing for that offshore experience?
Yeah, well, a lot of guys will advertise offshore, nearshore, and inshore trips.
And then they'll say trips starting at.
Right, starting at $500. But they'll have a list of species that they catch. Well, yeah, when they go offshore, they'll catch yellowfin tuna. But if you pick the $500 charter where they're fishing nearshore or inshore, you're not going to catch a yellowfin tuna. You know what I mean? So when you go to book a trip, just be careful. Make sure you call the captain, discuss everything, know what to expect. ask the captain, what are we going to be fishing for that day? How
Yes.
far are we going out?
Yes.
How long are we going to be out?
Right.
You know what I mean?
How far, to your point, like you just said, how
Yeah.
far? Oh, 5 miles. You're not going offshore.
Right. Yeah. So ask the captain what you need to bring, your personal items, stuff like that. As far as coolers, a lot of guys don't like you to bring big coolers on the boat. You know, just talk it over. Any good captain will talk. You know, take 5 or 10 minutes out of their day to talk to you about those kind of things, because they want you to be prepared and have a good time.
Yeah, and we want you to have a good time. You might be saying, well, how much is it to have a charter with the professor himself and his son? It's $2,400 in
Yeah.
2024.
Yeah.
Unless fuel prices change, that's what we expect to be this year going offshore. And
Yeah.
boy, would we love, love, love to have you. So hopefully now you know, okay, I know if I'm going to go offshore in North Carolina 2024, you're looking at mid-2s to mid-3s. We've talked about the tip. We've talked about why it's that much. Hopefully this has been helpful and educational to you. And until the next time, everyone, stay salty.